This is Peter just being a silly little guy, cheating death and all that.
Look, I caught Flo, Joe. You don't think I can catch you? Ah, my ankle! Ah!
And this is Peter being an absolute menace to the people around him. Today, I'm going through some of the worst things Peter's done to other characters in Family Guy, from cheeky little accidents that are easily forgivable to straight-up inhumane crimes that would land him multiple life sentences. Starting with Quahog's favorite news anchor, Tom Tucker, in Petarded, where Peter discovers he's technically mentally handicapped.
Peter, this is for the win. Say the word, what?
The fact that it took this long for him to get an official diagnosis for what we already knew to be true is crazy work. Naturally, Peter's pretty depressed when he learns he's not as smart as he thinks he is. He's so depressed, in fact, that he wants to just shut his eyes and make it all go away, which would be fine if he wasn't frackin' driving while doing that.
Peter, look out!
Holy crap!
Oh my god.
Honestly, he's lucky they were only on a residential street, not going 80 on the frackin' freeway. Naturally, Tom is pissed off at getting hit by a car, since that hot body and face of his is what pays the bills. When Tom sees that it's Peter that's responsible, however, his reaction isn't what you'd expect.
You're Peter Griffin, the fellow.
Yeah?
Oh, well, then don't worry about it.
It's honestly pretty wild to hear the R slur in 2025, but it was definitely a different time back when this episode first came out. Tom's nice enough to let bygones be bygones and give Peter a pass for running him over, but it doesn't change the fact that he's gonna have a nice fat hospital bill to look forward to for his broken back and twisted leg. Speaking of hospital bills, Death gets the Peter treatment, and Death is everyone gains immortality after he injures himself while chasing after Mr. Family Guy. Peter really is the type of dude to casually traumatize his friends, huh? I mean, he'd literally be splattering himself against the concrete if the whole immortality thing stopped working for some reason. It all starts when Peter declares himself as deceased to avoid paying a hospital bill for what looked like a potentially cancerous growth on his breast. But when Death comes to collect, Peter tries to book it and forces Death to put in the work to catch him.
Look, I caught Flo, Joe. You don't think I can catch you? Ah, my ankle! Ah!
Ouch, somebody hasn't been hitting legs at the gym. And as if breaking his ankle wasn't enough, Death has no choice but to rest it out on Peter's couch and watch as this bumbling idiot rubs it in his face.
I'm here with Peter Griffin. Claims he withstood a barrage of bullets and did not die.
Man, there is absolutely nothing going on behind those eyes of his. No wonder he got diagnosed in that last episode. Still, compared to what Peter's done to some of these other characters, Death got off pretty lucky with just a broken ankle. You know what else has got nothing going on behind the eyes? The literal brain-damaged horse whose corpse Mort has to deal with in Family Gay, where Peter becomes a proud homosexual after he volunteers himself as a test subject for a series of medical experiments to pay off his debts.
Guys, Brent can't fit in the glory hole, and that's why we all like Brent.
Yeah, we sure do like Brett. But not me, though. He's just a really cool guy is all. Enough talk about Brett. Let's talk about the frackin' brain-damaged horse that Peter buys while grocery shopping, which he then decides to enter into a horse race. After the horse ends up dying of a fatal heart attack and causing $100,000 worth of damages along the way, Peter decides there's only one way to properly dispose of the body.
Oh, boy.
Man, Mort just can't catch a break. Just imagine how long it took him to stock those beautifully organized shelves. All that property damage and having to get rid of a horse corpse isn't going to be cheap to fix, and poor old Mort ends up getting stuck with the tab thanks to Peter's carelessness. But Peter's actions against the people of Quahog really start to get gruesome with Connie and Peter's daughter, where Peter tries to be a better father to Meg after she falls into a coma caused by him ordering her to retrieve beer from a flooded basement.
If you come out of this, I am gonna treat you like a princess for the rest of your life.
Aw, it's like a Cinderella story where she goes from deranged servant to everyone's favorite princess. Spoiler alert, it's not gonna last. As it turns out, Peter is dead serious about keeping his word to Meg when she actually does wake up from her coma. So when Connie and her goons approach Meg to bully her for her enlarged posterior, let's just say that Peter's ready to step in to defend his daughter.
Say, can you do me a favor? You see that?
Dad, that's enough!
Now, Family Guy isn't afraid to depict some absolutely brutal beatdowns between their characters, but this one really stands out for the raw, primal noises Peter makes as he's turning Connie's face into a smash burger. I mean, he really gets into it, almost uncomfortably so. And she probably ends up needing tens of thousands of dollars in reconstructive surgery to fix up what's left of her face. Oh, but if you thought Connie was the only kid Peter was willing to beat the crap out of, guess again, Kyle becomes his next victim in The Tan Aquatic with Steve Zissou, where Stewie gets himself a tan and Chris has to deal with the new bully on the block.
And I want him back.
Oh, yeah?
What is it with dudes named Kyle being absolute And no offense to any Kyles watching this video, of course. You're great. I mean, my name's Kyle. It's not. My name isn't Kyle. In a surprising streak of continuing to be a good father, Peter actually steps up for his son here and confronts Kyle for being a bully. But when this little jerk-off makes fun of Peter over and over again, he reacts like any mature, responsible adult would do to such childlike provocations. Just like with the Connie beatdown, I think that while Peter's heart is in the right place, it doesn't really change the fact that he went way too hard and beaten this kid like his own personal punching bag, even if his name is Kyle. If anything, Peter's beatdown probably reinforced the idea in this kid's head that you can bully anyone you want if you're stronger than them, which will probably land him in jail or worse down the line. But despite Peter's preference for just beating up his victims, he's also capable of inflicting a more psychological type of suffering like what he did with Carter in Welcome Back Carter, where Peter catches the elder Peterschmidt having an affair and uses it to blackmail him into doing whatever he wants.
All right, you ready? I don't want to do this. Go!
Okay, so while I do feel bad for Carter here, a limo joust is low-key one of Peter's best ideas in this whole frackin' franchise. Things kick off when Peter catches Carter getting busy with a younger woman on his private yacht. Carter manages to scare Peter into submission at first by threatening to ruin him if the word gets out, but once his friends convince him to take advantage of the situation, Peter wastes no time in turning the tables, putting Carter right where he wants him.
All right, here's your Mike and Ike's with all the Ikes taken out.
Turning a successful businessman like Carter into a personal servant has got to be doing all sorts of damage to his ego, and Peter is eating it up, literally, in this case. I mean, he really rubs it in Carter's face, even forcing him to humiliate himself in front of Babs and Lois.
Peter is the best, and he is awesome, and he makes better laser sounds than I do.
And at this point, you might as well just own up to the affair. Anything is better than giving Peter the satisfaction of what he wants. Speaking of someone who usually doesn't give Peter what he wants, Lois becomes his next target in the courtship of Stewie's father, where Peter and Stewie have a bonding experience over their combined joy in torturing Lois. She really doesn't get paid enough to look after this man-child and their actual child. It all starts when Lois suggests that Peter spend more time with Stewie since he's been so occupied with work as of late. Of course, this backfires spectacularly in her face once Peter realizes that Stewie enjoys seeing him hurt Lois. And Peter being Peter, he quickly escalates the harmless pranks on his wife until they're completely out of control. Yeah, I think locking your wife in the trunk and then pushing the car into the lake goes a tiny bit further than a fun little prank, Peter. Now, Lois has had to put up with her husband's crap for the entirety of the series, from public humiliation in front of family and friends to just straight up disrespect for their marriage. But this literal murder attempt is what tops the list for me personally. Of course, Lois is far from the only one in the Griffin household who suffered Peter's wrath. Enter Brian in Brian the Closer, where Quahog's least favorite dog becomes a sleazy real estate agent.
Thank you, but I'm actually 42 years old.
That's not credible.
Ugh, I didn't think he could be any more insufferable than he normally is, but that gaudy yellow suit makes me want to just frickin' vomit. Now, you might have noticed Brian sporting a shiny new set of veneers in that last scene. As it turns out, Peter's the one to thank for that, as the two of them get into a bit of a fight over Brian's old rope toy. Things escalate to the point where Peter ties it to his frackin' car and speeds off with Brian still biting onto it for dear life. This leads to some pretty gnarly results. Now, normally, I'd be jumping up and down with joy at seeing Brian get what he deserves, and while I am still happy to see him looking like a deflated balloon, I do have to admit that Peter's the one at fault here for being so frackin' stubborn about a rub toy that's not even his to begin with. And knocking out an entire set of teeth is a pretty nasty thing to do to anyone, even if it is frackin' Brian. Peter's reign of terror doesn't stop there, though, as Cleveland Jr. becomes his next victim in a shot in the dark, where Peter starts up a neighborhood watch after his couch gets stolen.
Lois, I am an unelected vigilante, and I take my job very seriously.
Oh boy, Peter Griffin in a position where he thinks he has actual authority. What could possibly go wrong? As it turns out, quite a lot of things, actually, especially once Peter acquires actual guns for him and his friends to use on their night watches, despite Joe suggesting otherwise. And once Peter spots a shadowy figure entering Cleveland's house, he gets excited and sees this as the perfect opportunity to be a hero and stop a crime from happening in his neighborhood. Yeah, the optics on this aren't looking too good for you, lad. Now, while Cleveland Jr. is frickin' lucky he only got hit in the arm, getting shot in the first place is still pretty high up there on the list of things that suck if they happen to. But of course, it wouldn't be Peter Griffin if he didn't spread the misery around equally from son to father, which is exactly what he does to Cleveland in the same episode that he shoots his son.
Sorry, sir. No visitors.
Excuse me, I'll have you know I'm the shooter.
I get that the Family Guy writers were making a parody of the Trayvon Martin shooting, but this is getting a bit tasteless even for them. Naturally, Cleveland is pissed that Peter shot his son and wants nothing to do with him, so the latter goes over to his friend's house to try and appease him with cigars and his favorite bottle of booze. But we all know Peter's a bit clumsy even on his best days, and we all also know what happens when you mix fire with alcohol. You know, I got a feeling Peter would fit right into 1800s America wearing some white bed sheets and a hood, but I can't quite put my finger on it. Suffice to say that between having his son shot and his house burned to the ground, Cleveland might be right up there as one of Peter's worst victims. But if you were to ask Peter directly, he'd probably say it's not a race thing and that he terrorizes all the characters of Family Guy equally. Like what he did to Joe in Papa Has a Rollin' Son, where Peter spends the entire episode pretending to be Joe in front of Joe's dad.
Hi, Joe's dad. Dad? Joe, I'm Joe. You're my dad.
Oh, I didn't know Joe could walk. Oh, it's Peter. Yeah, he sure had me fooled. The episode begins with Peter and the guys tracking down Joe's father, Bud, as he's surprised for Father's Day, but Joe reveals that they were estranged because Bud has mocked handicapped people his entire life and don't know about Joe's handicappedness. So Peter decides to be a good friend and swap places with Joe while his dad's here. Unfortunately for Joe, Peter's envy quickly gets the better of him and things immediately spiral out of control.
Oh, that's the other good news. Bud's not leaving. I told him he can move in with me and Bonnie.
Yeah, okay. Why don't you just bang Bonnie while you're at it, Bud? No, not you, Bud. I'm talking to Peter. I'm at it as like a buddy thing. Turns out Peter really likes having a father figure in his life, and he's not willing to give it up so easily. As if to add insult to injury, he also doesn't say a word when Bud starts bashing on Joe while he's still disguised as Peter.
See, a guy like that should just stay inside so we don't have to look at him.
You know, considering you'll have one foot in the grave soon, I wouldn't be talking if I were you, Bud. But suffice to say that Joe takes a pretty fat L here with someone as brain dead as Peter trying to swoop in and steal his frackin' dad from him. As we go back to the Griffin household, though, Stewie somehow ends up taking an even bigger L in Brian Griffin's House of Pain, where Brian writes a TV pilot that gets sabotaged by James Woods.
Nobody here's Jewish, right?
I don't know. Are you Jewish, Gordon?
Gee, I don't know, Jeremy. Are you?
Get it? Because of the big nose and the whole thing about Jewish people controlling Hollywood? You know what? Let's just move on. Things kick off with Chris sneaking into Meg's bedroom to get his grubby little hands on his sister's personal diary. The two of them end up getting into a pretty heated struggle for the diary, and let's just hope there aren't any innocent bystanders caught in the mix. Oof. It's bad enough if your kid gets dropped on their head once. I can't begin to imagine how a whole frackin' flight of stairs is gonna end up doing to Stewie. To the surprise of absolutely no one, he ends up with a traumatic head injury, and Meg and Chris do their best to cover it up. Peter easily sees through their ruse, but only because he literally did the exact same thing to them when they were Stewie's age. Now that the jig is up, though, shortly Peter will do the right thing and get some medical treatment for his kid, right?
Got the little guy up from his nap. Say hello to everyone, Stewie.
Yeah, no, this is Peter we're talking about after all. Now, you might think Peter's blatant neglect of Stewie's head injury is where all this ends, but of course, in typical Peter fashion, he's got to find somebody to throw under the bus for this little mishap.
Oh my god! Stewie!
Okay, didn't think he'd literally throw his kid under a frackin' car, but that's Peter for you. Between several hours of parental neglect and being used as a literal doorstop for the family car, I'd say Stewie has plenty of things to be pissed off about with the fat man. Same goes for Quagmire in 420, where Stewie and Brian come up with a campaign to legalize marijuana in Quahog.
All we need is a bag of weed to keep us worry-free.
Hey, if they're willing to put in the effort to make a whole musical number out of it, maybe it's not such a bad idea. But Quagmire's not interested in the slightest about weed in this episode. He's head over heels with his new cat James and spends pretty much every waking moment with him, much to the chagrin of Peter and the other guys. So being the good friends they are, they sneak into Quagmire's place while he's out and task Peter with shaving the cat as a prank. Wait, they gave Peter the razor? Oh no!
Peter, you killed it.
Well, you guys relax. He's got 8 more lives. Okay, 7 more lives.
Yeah, I don't know what these guys were expecting, thinking Peter, of all people, wouldn't mess this up somehow. This isn't the first offense Peter's racked up against his dear pilot friend, though. It's easily the worst of the bunch, since Quagmire seemed to genuinely love and care for the cat. It was a rare moment of wholesomeness that shied away from his usual perverted antics, and Peter snatched it away with his idiocy like he always does. With everything that Peter's done so far, we might as well throw a little into the mix with what he did to Chris in Fresh Air, and I've talked about this episode so many times! Why do we gotta keep coming back to the episode, man? I know it's one of the worst things he's done. I know it fits. How does this episode always fit with things that we do? Yes, it's the episode where Chris becomes the sole heir to the entire Peter Schmidt fortune.
What?
My.
Oh no, my hairless twin got out.
And if you somehow haven't seen or heard of this episode before, it all starts with Chris looking after Carter after the latter breaks his leg at the mall and doing such a good job at it that Carter just straight up rewrites his will to give Chris all of his money. Naturally, Peter's pissed off that he lost his ticket to the gravy train and he will do anything to get back on board.
Hey, there he is. Hot dogs and Nintendo, huh, Chris?
Oh my frick. Ugh! You know it's bad when I'm calling something cringe. But when his initial attempts to be Chris's new best buddy don't pan out, Peter does the unthinkable out of his desperation to get his fat, greasy hands on the Peter Schmidt fortune.
Chris Griffin, will you marry me?
What? The... And as if forcing his son into a gay marriage wasn't enough, he drives him all the way out to frackin' Vermont to make it happen. Vermont! For crying out loud. That's the real torture. I'm kidding. I love you, Vermont. We're cool, right? Seriously, if it wasn't for Lois stopping the ceremony at the last frackin' second, Chris might have had to deal with the lifelong trauma of being married to his own dad. But you guys already know by now that I always save the best or worst for last. And who better to cap off Peter's reign of terror than everyone's favorite punching bag, Meg Griffin. Which is why I'm giving you not one, but 3 of the worst things Peter's done to her, because there's just that many terrible things. Like what happened in Dial Meg for Murder, where Meg goes to jail for hiding her inmate boyfriend.
I'm home. You're all my...
Sorry, Peter, there's a new man of the house, and it ain't you. While Meg does get her revenge against Peter in this episode, it all starts when he decides he wants to join the rodeo. But of course, he's not stupid enough to just blindly jump in there to wrangle a seasoned bull. If he wants to be a rodeo star, he's gonna have to get some solid practice first. Ouch, maybe it'll be like a handsome Squidward situation and she'll come out looking prettier after all that face damage. But as if lassoing your own frackin' daughter and ragdolling her across the house wasn't bad enough, Peter even tries to brand her like an actual frackin' cow.
What the hell?
That there's my steer, Griffin.
Thanks, Mayor West, I guess. Between the indecent public exposure and blatant bodily assault, Meg is already off to a rocky start here, but trust me when I say that Peter was letting her off easy here. He takes things all the way to the next level with his daughter, Giggity, and Meg stinks. Where the two of them end up having to spend some quality bonding time together.
Yeah!
Aw, that's actually kind of sweet. I can't wait to see how Peter screws this one up. It all starts with Peter and Meg actually starting to find things in common with each other after they take a trip to Green Mountain College for Meg's college interview. Peter thinks he's finally found someone he can trust to be his true self with, so he lets the walls down and shows Meg exactly what Peter Griffin is capable of.
This is a robbery! Everybody get on the ground!
Oh, that escalated quickly, to say the least. Okay, hold on. Let's keep it cool. Peter, no need to traumatize your daughter any more than you probably have already.
Who's the manager here?
I am.
Too late for that, I guess. Okay, now we can add a literal murder to the ever-growing list of traumatic events that Peter's put Meg through over the years. But the worst thing, by far, that Peter does to Meg happens in 8 simple rules for buying my daughter, where Peter has to find a way to pay off his crippling debt to the Goldmans. And yes, the Griffin men puking their guts out is part of how Peter racked up that debt. The episode starts with Peter popping into Mort's pharmacy to pick up some only to realize that he forgot his wallet. Being the savvy businessman that he is, Mort offers to open up a tab right there for Peter, who immediately goes on a wild spending spree and racks up about $34,000 in debt. So when Mort insists on getting repaid, Peter decides there's only one way to set things right, for himself, at the very least.
All right, listen, I got another idea. What if I sold you my daughter?
I think there's a word for that, Peter. That starts with an S and ends in a Y. I don't know. I can't quite put my finger on it. But yeah, treating his daughter like a literal property has got to be up there as one of the worst things he's ever done to Meg or pretty much anyone else in his life. But that about sums up Peter's reign of terror against every other character in Quahog for today. And if you want to see more Family Guy content like this, click on the screen right about now. Do it, or I'm sending Peter after you. Peter, get him! Wait, don't come after me!